All right, guys, welcome to the Leadership to Wealth podcast. I'm your host, as always, Neil D'Souza. Our guest today, he actually is all about financial freedom. In fact, it's his motto. And he says this can be achieved through basically owning multiple properties, having property investment strategies. And he's been, a teacher. He's done a number of things. And he is now teaching people about real estate and partnering and this kind of stuff. His company is called Global City Property Investments. Our guest today, Ashlee Cave. Ashlee, welcome to the show.
Hi, Neil. It's a pleasure to be on the show, to be honest, and I'm really looking forward to being here.
All the way from the UK. Well, and being in the world of real estate, you're always having conversations with people. You're always talking about opportunities, and you can you say something about your motto, financial freedom? How did something as simple as that become, or as complex as that become your motto?
So to be totally honest, I was sort of thinking about that over a number of years, and the first time I really thought about financial freedom was when I just got out of my first stint of uni. I thought, well, before I just go and be a PE teacher, let me see what the market is like and what sort of teachers are in high demand. And I saw that the science teachers were in very high demand, so I decided to go back to uni and do my PGC in biology and become a science teacher with the mindset that I wanted to be head of biology within 10 years of getting the first teaching post. And then it was about 3 years into it, I was head of biology at a school, and I was making a decent amount of money, and I was making sure I was putting back quite a bit and just seeing that I wasn't spending too much. I wanted to always stay well within my means, not live beyond my means. So I was kind of thinking to myself, if I was to do what most people do, which would to get on the housing ladder as quick as possible and then build up many liabilities, there will be a point where I'm going to have one income stream with multiple liabilities. And if that income stream was to go, I'll be in a bit of a problem.
Wow.
So I was always thinking of how can I make sure that I'm not a slave to one job. And that's kind of sort of pushed me into the rabbit hole of looking into other ways of getting income. So I started trading a little while after that. When I started, I really came to that realization. And I was looking at all different types of ways of making my money work for me a bit better. And I always wanted to get into property. But I thought I had to get large lump sum of cash and have it all behind me before I can get on the property ladder in terms of being a property investor. And that was what I thought based on what most people's beliefs were. But I went on a few different courses for property investing and using OPM or other people's money and different strategies. And I thought, right, okay, so if I put all the education in myself and I know the strategies and I can build a team, then I should be able to raise the funds to put into the correct strategy to get an excellent return on investment for the investor, and also to build my portfolio or to source property and then sell it on to an individual. So then that is when I said, right, here we go. The pennies dropped. This is going to be my this is going to be my venture. So I started really getting involved in it. Went on to more courses, invested more in myself, got a mentor, and then I said, right, we're gonna hit the ground running here. I'm gonna say if I put 100% of any of my spare time when I'm not teaching into building the business, I think in about 10 years time or 5 years time, I'm going to be in a very good position. So I just carried on just moving that doing a little bit and moving the goalposts, doing a little bit, moving the goalposts. So eventually I said, right, I've got the picture, the logo in my head. I know I'm going to be the key person of influence for the business. because first of all, I thought it was going to be more of a faceless organization. I'm just going to be able to do both things quite easily.
Okay,
I said, you know what, it'd be much better because I know what kind of person I am. I'd love it if I was an investor that actually could, if I could actually meet the person who was behind the whole organization, if I could actually meet them personally and get a good gist of them and therefore know, like, and trust them, then I'm more likely to want to work with them. So I said, well, therefore, it's advantageous for me to become the key person of influence, and let's just go for it, Ash. And that's what I did.
So why real estate? What got you to go down that road?
Well, when I was going through my down my rabbit hole of different courses and reading many different books, I realized that a lot of the individuals who I was sort of looking up to either made their money through real estate, or they were putting their money into real estate as another strategy or hedging and things of that nature. So I thought to myself, well, if real estate is good enough for this person who's well, let's say, who's this person? So the first person who I ended up getting mentored by was Liam Ryan. And if real estate is an excellent vehicle for him, then why can't it be an excellent vehicle for myself? So, and also looking at the writer of Rich Dad Poor Dad, when I was reading that, I seen, oh, he was actually in real estate and he built his wealth through real estate, and then looked into different avenues from that standpoint. I was like, I really like the idea of real estate and the fact that you can get capital growth, you can get cash flow and things of that nature. So this is a very good way to first off get cash flow and apply that to many different areas eventually in the long run.
Yeah. You don't really need to sell me on real estate. A big believer in it, and one of the things that we love, and I always talk to people about when it comes to real estate, is it's the number one most surefire way of making money. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be quick-witted. You don't have to be the best speaker. You don't have to be any of those things. Real estate is one of those vehicles that can do that for you. And are there other ways to make money faster? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there other ways that you can do all sorts of things and get get more fame? And absolutely. And real estate is that one way that you've had more people that accidentally become rich just through real estate. And so I always like to say, especially as a father of four, I go, how many things would I be able to do and build wealth in without taking massive amounts of time away from my family? Real estate's one of those strategies, as you talked about, that is really able to do that for you and leverage your time and leverage money, all of those things. So you had me right off the get-go. So I'm with you there. What for you has been the most challenging aspect of it, or perhaps maybe that's it, part A, and then part B is, what do you see as the most challenging for people that want to get into real estate, or that partner with you, or stuff like that? What are those two sides for you and for other people?
I think one of the most challenging things from my experience was acquiring the first property and also getting the funds at the same time. So it was points where I had a property acquired, and then the investor, which we agreed verbally, decided that no longer wanting to invest. So I was like, okay, now I've got to see if I can find some money somewhere. And because at that time I'm just getting started out, I only had like 2 investors, and one of them wasn't a large lump sum. They just wanted to sort of like dip their toe in it. So that in that case, we actually ended up losing that deal. And there was another time where I had the funds, and then the actual vendor decided not to give me the property in the end. So I'd actually gone away and spoken to clients, because I do service accommodation as a strategy. So I think it's called like rental arbitrage in your area.
Right.
And so I had a client which was a contractor, and he was actually he was commuting from Farnham to Chelmsford, which is over a 2-hour journey, like every day.
Yes.
So he was really struggling, and I said, brilliant. I can definitely solve your problem. I've got a unit we're going to be getting the keys to in the next couple of days. I can get you in that in within about 2 weeks. That's what because everything was agreed in principle with the vendor. I now had my client. I was like, all we got to do is meet in the middle and get all the furnitures in place. I'd already spoken to the furnishing companies, had beds on order, had everything ready to go. And then the date of signing the final contracts kept getting pushed back, and then the date of the key handover kept getting pushed back. And it was even a point where the client had spoken to me on numerous occasions, and he was getting quite anxious, because he obviously wants to move into the place in Chelmsford, and he couldn't do so. Now that was really difficult for myself, because like, I gave that person my word, and I really believe that my word is one of the most important things. I think if someone if someone says one thing and then does something totally different, I think that is like one of the worst things you can do. Yes, we have contracts in place to make sure people do that, but I'm a person say, if I say I'm going to do something, then I am going to do that, and at least that, and then some. So when I couldn't meet his expectations, which I set, that really bothered me. Also, it meant that the time put into sourcing the property was kind of lost at that particular time. Also had to take a loss on some of the furnishings and things of that nature. So that was some of the things which happened to me. But interestingly, about, I think it was 6 months after that, the same vendor asked me if I wanted the property. So I did take that in the end.
Okay.
So so it all came around in the end. So obviously the putting the time and effort in, and being the person that I am, and making the vendor still feel comfortable, even though it wasn't the best thing for him to do, because he did agree. We still ended up closing the deal, and that is one of our best performing units now. So
wonderful.
That's it. I think I've answered the first question. What was the second one?
Well, what it's like for what do you think the challenges are for the other investors? Just before you answer that, I wanted to say that actually, maybe about several years ago, I instituted my own rule when it comes to investors, and one of the rules was, once you give me your word, because I'm going to give you my word. Once you give me your word on something, that's what it is. And if you break that, then we're done. And so I just move on. And I've had investors that have done that, and they've been upset. And I said, if I can't trust, do you expect to be able to trust me when I give you my word on something? Well, then I need to be able to trust you. Not that you can't change your mind on something, but once you say yes, then the yes is a yes. Because otherwise, if we have to start getting into legal battles over a close partnership like that, then there's already enough of a minefield out there without having to deal with that internally. And most people really get that, and what I like about that is it actually brings more integrity to the relationship between us, and they understand that I'm committing to them in a different way than perhaps other people are. So anyways, I just thought I'd share that, because that was I found in my journey, as I got to a certain point, that was something that really made a difference for me. So you were now just saying you were going to tell us a little bit about the other side. What would you say some of the challenges are for the people that want to invest with you, or want to learn from you, get involved in this? What's some of the challenges you see for them?
I think one of the major challenges is if that they trust me, because obviously,
Ooh, this is a good conversation.
yeah,
Let's talk about this.
yeah, because
What does it take
obviously,
to develop trust? All right.
I think it takes a lot of things. I think it takes I would say like rigorous authenticity, because I think end of the day, if I am exactly what I am, I'm telling you exactly what I am. I do exactly what I say I'm going to do,
Yeah.
and through the time of when I've started this journey and been full on trying to build the business, that I've documented most, if not everything, from every single networking meeting that we went to, or I went to, which were to begin with, which were virtual. So all the virtual meetings I had with my mentors, or networked, or any type of education I went on through the time during lockdown, I documented everything, every single most, or if not every single viewing that I went on, regardless if I got the property or not. I made a note, took photos, recorded what happened, what questions that I asked the vendor, why I may not have received the deal, when we missed out on a deal. I've
Mhm.
recorded all those sort of things. And so over a course of now would be over 3 years now, I've got that sort of track record of what I've done and why I can say I am going to do exactly what I say I'm going to do.
Mhm.
Also, there's the testimonials from our investors and our clients.
Yeah.
So our investors who started from the beginning, have like reinvested with us so they can sort of compound their investment. They've done so, and some of them have taken their investment out and they got what they needed, which is fantastic. And the clients who end up staying in our units are getting a service which they enjoy and
Mhm.
they get a lot of value from.
Yeah.
So that is why that's what I do to make sure that I can be a trustworthy person.
Yeah.
And particularly, like, I like to make sure that my investors, I can trust them, similar to what you were saying.
Yeah.
So are there the people who have a similar sort of mission or value that I have? And if it is the case, then we can sort of join together, because you're on the same path, I'm going the same way. Let's help each other to get there a little bit quicker, you
Mhm.
know, or a bit more, let's say, in a more structured way, and so everyone knows exactly what's going on. So therefore, we were not going to make any mistakes, and that those are like the little things that I think that are important. Like value is so important. Like I started a business to make sure that my family and myself can have freedom, financial freedom at some point,
Mhm.
or I can have a life which I don't have to have a holiday to escape from. So I say to my like it's quite. I always people think I'm a bit weird when I say this, but a lot of people go on holidays like a couple of times a year, or maybe once a year. I say there's nothing wrong with that, but I think to myself, if I made a life which I never had to escape from because it was literally like a holiday for me, I now would have, say if I had another 30 years in me, I got 30 years of being on holiday. Why wouldn't I take that? And why wouldn't I work to that? If it took 5 years to do that, and then I had another 25 years of being literally on holiday because I created a life which I haven't got to escape from, then that is worth giving a go. So that's part of what of my values or my mission, to be totally honest. And when I speak to our investors, I sort of decide, I figure out via a few questions, are they on the same mission? Are they trying to make sure that their family never want for anything, or if anything was to happen, could they afford private healthcare? Is it so they can make sure that every time they go on holiday, it's not paid for by their earned income, it's paid for by the passive income,
Yeah.
something like that. I say, is that the case? If you want, brilliant. We can see what can we do to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
How much normally do you spend on a holiday? Is it 300 quid? Is it a grand? Is it 10 grand? Whatever it is you spend on a holiday. What kind of strategy can we do so that you can get that sort of return
Yeah.
per annum? Now we've
Yeah.
solved the problem for him.
Yeah, without a doubt. I
Yeah.
actually was just on I went on a vacation down to the Caribbean last year,
Yeah.
and while I was there, and this person said, "Oh, you know, it was a good escape."
Yeah.
And I immediately said, "I'm sorry, I'm not trying to escape.
Yeah.
Um, my this is an extension of my life. This is part of
Yeah.
it."
Yeah.
Um, and so, but I understand how that occurs for most people. Just
Mhm.
like you said, a
Yeah.
lot of people are trying to get away from life, trying to get a break, trying to
Yeah.
escape. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place um, for taking time away from your regular routine,
Yeah.
right? Because absolutely, you can go here, and it is a different routine,
Mhm.
but just the idea that you're escaping
Mhm.
from your regular life, I was like,
Yeah.
there's something missing there that you
Yeah.
need to bring in to your regular life, so that this just is part of that extension, right, to it.
Mhm.
And interestingly, one of the things that I realized, because I thought about it, I was thinking about that, and what came to me was, I want more of the people that I partner with, that are clients of mine, that you get into a sphere where you're friends at that point. And I
Yeah.
thought, I think I want to have more of them come
Yeah.
on these vacations as well.
Mhm.
And so that's actually one of the things that I'm going to be working on creating this year,
Mhm.
is sort of group vacations and that, and being able to go down there so that we can still have the great conversations that
Yeah.
we have right now
Yeah.
in these kind of places. So I really resonate with what you're saying there and what
Mm.
you're creating there.
That sounds cool, to be fair. Like, I would love that, to meet up with a bunch of likewise individuals. Could be in the Caribbean, it could be somewhere which is maybe a bit colder, maybe in the Alps. I don't know. Don't really care, to be honest.
Let me ask you on this question of trust. I want to ask you sort of a difficult question,
Mhm.
and you may or may not want to answer it.
Mhm.
Um, do you see, your the color of your skin, or being a male, as being a challenge in building trust? Do you ever see that show its
Mhm.
face?
That's a good question. I actually thought to myself that, yeah, it would have been a problem, and that's what sort of led me on more of a road to be like, literally just be me, regardless of what people think. So, like, I have a way of speaking which might not be like the average, like, British black person may not speak how I speak.
Okay.
So sometimes they like, when I open my mouth, I think, oh, where have you been, or where, because I'm actually from Cardiff, like, originally. Well, I was born in Cardiff and I moved over to Essex, and they must say, because I don't sound a certain way, they kind of have a little bit of a distrust for me because I don't sound like them. And then also from experience, I think, yeah, there are some people who do think, or might have maybe a slight prejudice, that perhaps I might not be as trustworthy. But I just think, at the end of the day, if I just be me, then it doesn't matter if someone doesn't really grasp what I'm doing, if they don't want to work with me. Because if they don't want to work with me, then they're not my investors, they're not my people.
Yeah.
And that's how I sort of go for it. Like, there's going to be ridicule at some points, but I would say, for every one person that is going to be ridiculing you, it's probably about 10 people who are singing your praises, and who are literally hold you in high regard. So I just don't. To be honest, I just don't care. If someone doesn't want to work for me because of the color of my skin or whatever, they're not my people. I don't care, and they can go do whatever they want to do, and they can work with whoever they want to work with. Perhaps one of the faceless organizations or something. But I know that I'm the person who takes pride in what he's doing, and I will basically walk you through, hold your hand from day one, from when we might have our first coffee or first meeting, to if you end up being with me for another 10 years investing together, if we end up doing development, that's the same person from there until when we're doing development. Obviously, there's going to be some sort of growth in that time. So hopefully, I'm not exactly the same person, but I'll be like a maybe version 10.0 by that time. But I would have still, from that person to the next person, I am who I am.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask that question because I know that, you know, there are enough people out there that wonder if those types of things are going to be, if it's going to impede them in their journey. And I know that I've actually dealt with it out
Yeah.
there, and there are times where, and actually, I still get it from time to time, but in a sort of a different way, because people will talk to me on the phone, and they'll, and then we meet in person, and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were, a white guy," and you know, I've got an Irish first name and a Portuguese last name, and I don't have the accent that they think goes along with my complexion, right? And so it's always interesting. Now, I'm completely with you in terms of the people that want to come alongside you. That won't make a difference, even if they are surprised about any of those types of things. They'll move past that very quickly. And I don't hold that against anyone that, oh, you thought one thing. But I think it is part of it can be part of our psyche based on what you've dealt with growing up. Perhaps if you've dealt with discrimination or this type of stuff growing up, then I can understand it being there. And what I want the listeners to hear is that it really doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like. If you're authentic, if you're about building trust, if you have integrity, those types of people will come alongside.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. And I think if you're not authentic, people will smell it a mile away. And even if you have good intentions, it doesn't matter. The lack of authenticity is going to make people not want to work with you.
Yes.
I know when I've actually mentored some teachers, and I always said to them that if you want to be a better version of what you're doing right now, you need to be authentic to who you are. Don't try and be what they've taught you. You need to be whoever you are with a little bit of dash of what they taught you. So then the students know that they know, like, and trust you. They sort of have a buy-in to what you're trying to do. Because there's a lot of things that we may try to teach people in education system, which they don't necessarily want to do. But the fact that they know, like, and trust you, they will go with you on that particular journey and learn what needs to be learned in order to get to the next stage. So that's what I've learned through going through, but from my experience and having the mentors I've had previously, and just taking the chances, basically. Like when I was sort of going through the sort of self-development path, and I was still teaching, I thought to myself, well, I've got literally a captive audience here. So if everything that I learned from reading, maybe what's the name of the book? The Stranger's Secret. If whatever I learned from reading that, if I can apply that to my style of teaching, then let's see how it pans out. And as I carried on, like, being more me, the actual teaching and behavior management just was much easier. And I said, well, if only every trainee teacher knew that would be a pretty liberating experience, I believe. So I just make sure that I pass that on to anyone who's getting into education sector if they happen to be one of my mentees.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that the more that you are you, the easier it is both for you and for the people around you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You'll never get to the trust aspect. No, like trust. You'll never get to trust because people never actually get to know you. So what is it they end up liking? And I see that as a challenge in the industry. And maybe you can give me your thoughts on this, is that people put up a persona that they think is what people are going to want to see. They're going to want this type of person. And hey, how are you doing today? And we're wheeling and dealing, and we're driving all sorts of cars and all of this kind of stuff. And they try to portray this image. And so when someone gets to like that, you very quickly realize that there can't really be any trust, because you've now lied about who you really are, and so it becomes a fragile house that you've just built.
Exactly. I totally resonate with that, and like anytime I see some ad that comes on and they're doing the exact sort of expression which you just did, I'm like, I'm not listening to that. This person is chatting crap. I'm not having it, and I don't even listen. But as soon as someone just comes on, if it happens to be an ad and they seem more authentic to me, then I'll give them a time of day, 1 minute, 2 minutes, however long the ad is. Then here we go. I might actually buy a course or something, or I might actually go and look up this person a bit more and find out what is their product or service that they provide. And then you never know, down over a couple of maybe weeks or whatever, you might end up buying that product or service. But that's because of the fact you've been authentic. And I think if anything you do, you need to be literally as authentic as you can be. Maybe it might be uncomfortable sometimes, but I think you have to be. Like, some people think that you can't have any mistakes and things. You can't stumble over a word or two or things like that.
That and I think, complete lies.
You don't have to be polished. I think the best thing is the imperfect. I think the imperfect is perfect. And I think nowadays and age, we have a lot of people trying to be perfect, and that perfect persona, which is then put on lots of social media outlets. They want to be that perfect life. I've got this house. Look at where I'm going on holiday. Look at this car which I bought, which more often than not, it might all be on finance or whatnot, which is not such a bad thing as long as you're financed for the right reasons. But I just think that sometimes that they all got this persona they're putting on, and then when someone comes along and they are authentic, I think that is a breath of fresh air, to be honest. And that's why I like to be just me.
Well, I think there's authenticity is the only persona. Who you are authentically is the only persona that you can maintain. And that's the part of it that people miss. So for guys, for those of you that are listening, I think it's important to realize that the closer you can get to your authentic self, the easier it is to maintain that going forward. And the people that come alongside, and those that don't. Now, I think the other thing that should be said is that people can get it mixed up in terms of, well, this is just who I am, and not realize that you can still create new versions of yourself, right? Like you even said, the 10.0 version of yourself. There is no way that if you are moving forward, you're moving into these areas that you're not sure about. There's no way for you to not grow. Like it's an impossibility. And it's those very challenges that'll force you to grow. So as you grow, you can continue to share who you are authentically, including the trials and that. And I think that actually gives you strength and credibility when talking to investors.
Because you're showing the investor that you're able to overcome adversity. You're able to solve a problem. So I think if I was someone investing and the person who I was invested with was lacking in resilience, I would be a bit, let's say, I would be very hesitant to pass funds over to them if they were lacking in resilience, because obviously there's going to be times where things may not work to plan. There might be a case where you're doing development and maybe the contract doesn't turn up. How are they going to resolve it? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's something happened now that, like during COVID, the cost of materials went skyrocketed. Now, how are you going to solve the problem? We still got to try and come in on budget or as close to budget. What do we need to change?
Yeah.
You know, like in my case, we had clients but no units. How am I going to resolve the problem of having clients and no units?
Yeah.
I need to go find some units. I need to change the strategy. How am I finding units? Am I using letting agents? Now let's try and go direct to vendor. So in that case, I was starting to ring the vendors using Open Rent, which is a portal which the landlords can promote their properties directly to the people who want to rent them for like rental arbitrage. So I use different strategies to try and make sure I overcome the problem. So for me, it gives me confidence when I speak to an investor and I say, look, this is your X amount of money you're going to put with us for X amount of time. I'm going to give you, let's say it might be 5% or 10% or whatever return on investment that we agree on. And the reason why I am confident that you are going to get this is because it's going into this strategy and I'm getting X amount of return on investment, which is probably in a lot of cases with rental arbitrage and how we do it, we're getting 150, 200% return on investment for the capital put into the actual deal. Mm-hmm. So now I'm happy, more than happy, that I can confidently give you your return. So that's how I've gone off on a tangent there a little bit, but it just kind of went,
Look, I sort of have a, I'm going to give my sales secret. This is my sales secret. when talking to people, I tell them all the worst things that can happen in some of these deals. And most people think I'm crazy that I would do. Well, why would you say this? Why? I said, I tell people the worst case scenario. And then of course they ask me the question of, well, what did you do in that? Or how did you deal with that? And then I tell them the answer. This is what we did. This is what we, this is how you go through it. And so if they now know the worst case scenario, number one, they know what it is for themselves. Number two, if we're in a situation and that ever comes up, they know that I know how to deal with that.
Exactly.
And number three is that if they're okay with that, then we're going to have a great relationship because 90%, 95% of the time, we're not dealing with the worst case scenarios, right? And so you've already sort of set that expectation. And for the people that aren't prepared for that, I'm perfectly fine with it. You know what? When you are prepared and you're ready for that, then come on back and let's talk about it. I'd rather look at it from that perspective and work with people that are prepared from that perspective, because then everything else is golden from there on. So anyways, that's my secret sales technique. I tell people the worst stuff possible.
Exactly. I do something very similar, and I always sort of either open or close, and I say, well, I'd love to help you, and if I can't help you, I'll at least point in the right direction. So if something else that might be more suited to you, then here you go. That's where I'll sort of point you to. When you're ready, come back. No problem at all. And then I hope to work with you. But if it's not right for now, then when it is right for you, well, let's have at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always that aspect of people are expecting you to hide something from, like if it's a new relationship, people, as we're talking about trust here, right? So people are expecting you to hide something. So when you actually come out with the worst of it, it actually lends towards them going, oh, okay, now they start asking you about the good stuff, as opposed to you having to reveal, like them asking you the questions of the bad stuff. Oh, why didn't he tell me about this? Why didn't he tell me about that? And at any rate, as we talk, because I guess this conversation has really been all around building trust and that aspect of leadership. I think that's, for me, there's an ex-FBI negotiator. His name's Chris Voss. He's written some books, and he Never Split the Difference. And he talks about that, the value of telling people the worst case scenario, the value of giving people the power to say no, empowering them to say no, rather than, you know, sometimes people think that when people that are in real estate are just trying to take your money.
Yeah.
What good is that if we can't have a proper partnership? Right.
Yeah. I've listened to that book quite a number of times, and I always try and get the first no out of the way.
That's right.
With anyone, get that first no out of the way and let them feel that they're in control and things of that nature. And it has paid dividends, especially when trying to negotiate the deals to where every party is happy. That's been really good.
Speaking of books, do you have any books that you would recommend for people to read?
So some of the books which I've read has really paid dividends to me would have been Secrets of a Millionaire Mind. That got my money mindset like on point, and it was also able to get me to understand some of my prior experiences and what led me to have a certain belief and things of that nature. So that was really good. Think and Grow Richer is a book which I've read multiple times. I think that was called The Science of Getting Rich. I think that was one from I can't remember who the author is of that one. And another one which I've really enjoyed, I've read a few times, was I think it's called High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, got me to manage myself a bit better, and it made me understand that I was always sort of destined to do something entrepreneurial because of my mindset and how I like to do things. So the reason why I believe I changed from multiple different roles is because I kind of felt like controlled or stagnated. So I sort of needed something to make my own and have challenges all the time. And I think, that book was paid dividends to making me understand why I am the way I am, really.
Well, let me ask one question about that, because it's actually something that I took note of when you first started, and you said you went through, and after you came out of school and you were trying to find jobs and you weren't sure what, and then to be able, because I'm sure there's lots of people that don't know, they're in flux, they feel stuck, they're trying to figure out what's the next thing. And they're probably wondering, how did you get from there to be able to figure out the next move? What was your ability to figure out the next move?
For me, it was to be okay being uncomfortable. I said, always be okay being comfortable. And if you can do that, you can pretty much put anything into place, I believe. So I said, well, what's the worst case scenario with going back to university and becoming a teacher? I said, okay, I've got to reduce my outgoings. I've got to sell my car because at the time I had an Audi A4. So I downgraded to an Audi A1. And then I got
That's not much of a downgrade for a student.
that is fair, to be honest. But in comparison, it was a bit of a downgrade at the time. It was automatic. I had to go to a manual or stick shift, that was a bit of a downgrade. I thought, but I still wanted to have like my sort of a car. So I did that. And I thought, right, it's going to only another year to get a PGC. What's the worst that can happen? It's going to be some late nights. Got a couple of assignments to do. After I've done that, I'm going to have a PGC, and now I'll never have to worry about having a job again. So I thought, okay, that's worth being uncomfortable. Let's go for it then. And then we've taken the steps which have led me to starting my own business and things. It was, every time I learned something, I thought, well, let me try and apply it. And if I can go through what I believe Bob Proctor calls is go through the terror barrier. So every time I learned something new, I thought I need to apply it. So go to a networking event. speak to someone, make those calls. The first time you make the call is going to be a bit scary. It's going to be daunting. It may not go too well, but it's okay being crap. Hopefully, if you do it enough times and you're okay with being crap for a little while, and you get through that terror barrier, you're going to get, well, you get like a rush of dopamine anyway, because you've pushed yourself through that uncomfortable part.
Yeah.
Now, when I get the feedback from it, what do I need to do better? Do I need to make sure I'm not talking too fast? Do I need to make sure I'm not worried about messing up? Because I remember a few times some of my calls, I couldn't remember my sales pitch, or there's parts where I could remember it, but for some reason it felt like I had like cotton wool in my mouth. I just couldn't say it, couldn't articulate it. So I had some really good laughs with the letting agents or the estate agents at the time. I said, I don't know what's going on here, but I can't talk today. But we had a really good laugh, and from that point, I actually went and in person and spoke to her. And I think now we've built like a relatively good working relationship. So she knows me by face, I know her by face and by name. So therefore, by going through that terror barrier and making the mistakes, I've been able to progress and build the skill sets. Because obviously, every time you get past that part, which is a bit challenging, that becomes a strength. So that is how I sort of feel about it.
That is sort of a weakness for human beings. We're not very good at being kind towards ourselves.
No.
We're good at being comfortable with ourselves. Like finding a place of comfort, but we're not as good at being kind. And it's interesting that I've found that some of the highest performers in the world, in whatever area, they have an ability to be kind to themselves in the sense of allowing them the opportunity to fail. Even if they hate the feeling, they're kind enough to themselves to allow themselves to go do it. And that ability of saying, okay, I'm going to allow myself to go make a mistake, gets you one step further, right? As you talked about with going through that terror barrier, and each time you do that, you learn and you grow, and the value of who it makes you, who it creates you into as a person, as a monster, in the space is right, is night and day. And and unfortunately, people treat themselves, I think, they're monsters towards themselves too often, and they hold themselves back, and they think there's some magic formula, when really it's as simple as allow yourself to go make a mistake. Imagine if we couldn't learn to walk until we were in our 20s, or nobody would walk, right? No one would ever walk. But thankfully, kids are really forgiving and really kind with themselves, and so they don't care how many times they fall. They get back up, and as a result, 99.9% of people in the world are able to walk.
Yeah, most definitely. I use a similar analogy when I've spoken to students. Say, when they're scared to put their hand up and say something, I say, look, end of the day, most of you can walk here. You've all walked in here, and at some point when you first started walking, you probably fell over a few times, but you didn't just fall over and say, that's it, I'm done with walking, I'm gonna stay crawling here. You got yourself back up. You learned that if you take a step too far to the left or too far to the right, you're probably going to fall over, and you got the feedback from it, and then you applied it, and now you're able to walk or whatnot. And it's the same with
and you didn't even know what the feedback was at that age, right? And that's an interesting one, because oftentimes we think we need to figure out what that is, what the feedback. Oh, what did I learn there? And we spend all this time trying to figure that out before we go try to walk again. Whereas a kid doesn't even know what they did wrong, so to say. They just immediately try to go walk again, and and they end up learning it.
Yeah, definitely.
So let me ask you, as we wrap up here, what do you have lined up? What's exciting? What's new for 2023? What do you got in the hopper that you're working on?
Right, that's a good one, Neil. I've got a few things in the back burner I've been working
You said
on
the
at the moment.
podcast. You got a fresh
Yeah,
podcast on the go,
yeah.
which
So
is called.
it's called the Creative Property and Entrepreneurs Podcast.
Sorry, say that again.
Creative Property and
Property.
Entrepreneurs Podcast. Sorry, my accent came out then. Yeah, so we launched that in, I believe it was the beginning of February. We launched that,
Okay.
and it's fortnightly episodes at the moment. So, so next episode will be coming out next week, not this week. And just trying to get similar to what you're doing, like-minded individuals, successful individuals in their own right, in different, mainly property, but it can be another business venture. I think there's a lot to learn in speaking to them, and I like to learn a lot from making new connections and networking. I thought it's only right for me to share some of these connections, so we can do that, and hopefully people can get to know me a bit more, and I can build the network from that standpoint. We're also working on acquiring some property in London, and also potentially doing our first development this year. So we're working on that as the days and weeks roll on, to see if we can find a development opportunity. Rather, that might be a commercial to resi, or it might be just a straight up redevelopment of a residential property of some sort. So I'm looking into doing that, and that's what we've got in the immediate for this year. And then we'll see what sort of transpires from those opportunities.
Okay, and let me ask the other question. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Right, best way to get a hold of me would be on my Instagram, which is just Ashlee_Cave. They can also get to me on TikTok, which I started using now. So I think we've got a lot of video content. So that's the same as again. So it's Ashlee_Cave, and that's the best way to reach out to me. And then you can see any other things I may have going on those channels.
Love it. And so let me just ask this last question about the podcast. What are you learning or loving so far in just starting that out, being a month into that? What are you learning or loving?
I'm literally loving the whole conversations I'm having with the people. The amount of things, that the little golden nuggets I'm learning from speaking to the individuals is amazing. And then also when we're having a conversation, it reinforces some of the things that I've learned over time, and I sort of share that as well. So it's a two-way street, and I really enjoy that conversation where we have, and like from them I've actually ended up adding some people into my particular team, or we're going to work together in some sort of partnership in future from that. And if I didn't have the podcast, I probably wouldn't have had that opportunity. So it's amazing, isn't that right?
Yeah. Any parting words that you'd like to share as we wind out?
I'd say, if there's anything you want to start, the best time to start was probably yesterday. The second best time to start is now. So get started now, and be really, really excited about who you're going to become.
Yeah, love it. Well, guys, this is another episode of the Leadership to Wealth podcast. We want to thank Ashlee Cave for coming on and sharing his journey. And Ashlee, I really appreciate you really talking to us and creating about trust and developing trust, and that is something that everyone wonders about and what it can look like. And so I appreciate you getting into that and the nitty-gritty around that. And thank you for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
All right, guys, we'll see you again next week on the Leadership to Wealth podcast.